Trust the Profits is proud to be sponsored by Game of Silks. Go to silks.io to get in the game. Real ownership, real races, real rewards.
Sure bad coffee.
It's Preakness week, and we're going to be talking about the big race on this edition of the Pedigree Puzzle. So the Preakness is this Saturday, May 18th. It will go as the 13th race at Pimlico with a post time of 7:01 p.m. Eastern. As always, it's a mile and 3/16, and the purse has been raised to $2 million this year, which is over $21,000 for Game of Silks players. So this morning we got some pretty big news. Muth, the morning line favorite, has spiked a fever and will be scratched, but we're still looking at a solid field of 8 contenders led by Kentucky Derby winner Mystic Dan. There is potential for rain in the forecast, so keep that in mind while handicapping the card, and make sure you take a look at those scratches the morning of the race. As per usual, we're going to go horse by horse through here with thoughts on their past performances and brief notes on their pedigrees, since at this point we know most of these horses pretty well, and pedigree really isn't going to factor into your handicapping in a race like the Preakness. So let's go ahead and get started with Mugatu. It's really cool to see a son of Maryland sire Blofeld in the Preakness, but it's hard to see him winning it. He still has only a single win. He was beaten 7.5 lengths by Sierra Leone in the Bluegrass, but was still grinding it out to the finish in that most recent effort. So I respect the connections for taking a shot in here. They've said the distance will help him, and he's making a career kind of out of picking up checks in big races. He's not really hitting the board, but he's picking up checks. He earned nearly as much for that 5th place finish in the Bluegrass as he did for breaking his maiden at Gulfstream Park. So why not take a shot? This isn't a horse that I think bettors really need to worry about, but I applaud the connections for coming in here, taking a chance. And the one thing we know about this horse is he is going to keep coming. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him pick up a nice $60,000 check for finishing 5th in the Preakness, but I don't think he's really going to factor into your handicapping too much as a horse who comes from behind and probably is just a step below these. He is a son of Blofeld, as I mentioned, who's been a fantastic regional sire. In just 56 starters, he's gotten 48 winners and 5 stakes winners, plus 6 additional black type placed runners. So that's fantastic start at stud for Blofeld. And he's out of a mare by Union Rags, who's produced 2 other winners from 2 foals to race, both of them full siblings to Mugatu. And this Quality Road Dixie Union Cross has gotten grade 1 winners such as Klimt, Salty, and Caledonia Road. So you know it can get a nice horse. Mugatu's a nice horse. I'm not sure he's a horse you really have to figure into your handicapping too much in here, though. So let's take a look next at Uncle Heavy. This is another long shot, but one with a little bit more to go on here. He's 3 for 5 lifetime. It does need to show some improvement. He was a winner of the Withers over El Grande O. Notably, that was over a muddy sealed track, and prior to that, he'd won the State Bred Wait For It Stakes at Parks over a good sealed track. So this horse can handle the off-going. He didn't show much finishing 5th in the Wood Memorial, but there were some excuses there. He was drawn wide. He was much further back than usual. So I think that if you like this horse, you have a reason to draw a line through that last effort. And, you know, if you think this horse is improving, then perhaps he's a horse you think could grind out an underneath placing. For me, I think I'm going to pass. He's a son of Social Inclusion, who's a solid regional type sire, son of Pioneer of the Nile, who was probably best known for his dominant 10-length allowance win over Honor Code as a 3-year-old, but he was also 3rd in the Wood Memorial and the Preakness that year. So I don't expect Uncle Heavy to have an issue with the extra 16th of a mile that he's going to be facing here. And there's not a whole lot to say about the bottom half of this pedigree. He's the second foal from a winning Tis Wonderful mare. That first foal was also a winner. Dam's a half to 3 winners. And this mare sold for just $1,700 while carrying Uncle Heavy. So that has proven to be quite the bargain for Expect Wonderful. Moving on to Catching Freedom. He ran a nice race to finish 4th in the Derby. And like Mystic Dan, got a really nice trip. Perfect rail run, just wasn't quite good enough. He's already a winner of the Preakness distance with that Louisiana Derby win. And so I think he absolutely has the talent to win this race. But I do wonder if he's up against it a little bit from a pace scenario perspective. I definitely wouldn't talk you off of him if you like him on top, but I think he's a horse I'm a little more interested underneath in a race that I think is going to have a fairly slow to moderate pace. So this is one of those horses. I've already talked about him in my Kentucky Derby video. He's a son of excellent sire Constitution. He's a half to graded stakes placed runners, graded stakes placed runner Bishop's Bay, and stakes placed Strava. His dam is a stakes winner by Pioneer of the Nile. We know he can get the distance. We know he's a talented horse. There's not a whole lot to say about the pedigree at this point. Muth is scratched, so that brings us next to the 5, Mystic Dan. This is your Kentucky Derby winner, and he proved in that race that worries about the distance weren't necessary. He did get a perfect ride from Brian Hernandez, and that was the difference between winning and losing for him, I think you can say pretty confidently. But he handled the distance much better than I, for one, thought he would. So I'm not concerned about him coming back in the distance again here. He wasn't really that far off that fast pace either in the Derby and has shown some tactical speed in the past, so I don't think he's going to be coming from too far out of it. It is notable that the worst race of his career came off of that 2 weeks rest and an allowance optional claimer at Churchill last November. So the turnaround is the question here with this horse, but they wouldn't be running the horse if they didn't think they had a shot. So while I think this horse could absolutely win, I'm a little bit worried. My main concern is that with Muth out, I just don't think he's going to present any value on the win end. And of course, we all know he ran off with that Southwest on a wet track, so that certainly wouldn't hurt his chances. Another horse we've talked about, Mystic Danny's a son of 2-time Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner Golden Sense, but it's proven now that he has the ability to get a classic distance. And in the Kentucky Derby, he became the 3rd Grade 1 winner, bred on this Into Mischief Tisnow Cross, along with Champion Wonder Wheel and La Troyenne Stakes winner Played Hard. The 6 is Seize the Gray, the first of 2 D. Wayne Lucas trainees in here. He's wheeling back off a win in the Pat Day Mile on the Kentucky Derby undercard, and is usually a fairly consistent horse with the exception of that poor effort in the Bluegrass. And notably, not only did he have some early trouble in here, so perhaps that was why, or was it the fact that that was off a 2-week layoff from the Jeff Ruby Stakes? This is another horse where the layoff is a little bit, or not the layoff, but the lack of a layoff, the quick turnaround is a little bit of a question mark. So for me, this is a tough horse to have any confidence in, really, in any way I would want to use him. I figure he needs to improve like most of the other long shots. Could maybe be a little bit of a pace factor. He showed some speed in those sprints and wasn't far off the pace in the Pat Day Mile. So there's a chance here. His maiden win was wire to wire over a sloppy track. So off track won't hurt his chances, but he's not a horse I'm really interested in using here. Taking a look at his pedigree, he has yet to race farther than a mile and an eighth and has yet to win at greater than a mile and a 16th, but his pedigree at least suggests that the distance shouldn't be an issue. He's a son of Arrogate out of a Smart Strike mare, but based on those efforts at a mile and an eighth, you do have to have a little bit of a concern about the distance. This is a really nice female family, going back to the excellent shopping branch of the Lady Be Good family, but hard to see him getting a Preakness win, for me at least. The other D. Wayne Lucas trainee is drawn alongside, that's Just Steel. He was more forwardly placed than I, for one, expected in the Derby, and he paid for it late, finishing 17th. But looking back, perhaps it shouldn't have been a surprise that he was that close, as he was a speed horse for the most part in his early races and wasn't far off of the pace in the Arkansas Derby. So I think it's reasonable to expect him to be tactical again, though probably not going for the lead like he was in the Derby. And a run back to that Arkansas Derby could put him in the mix here. Muth was your morning line favorite, and that's who he chased home in that race. Now, another question with Just Steel is, when is this schedule going to catch up to him? 12 races in 12 months is an awfully busy schedule for a horse in the modern era. And I'm just starting to wonder if at some point that will catch up to him, or if he's just a horse who can take this kind of schedule. Lucas isn't afraid to take a shot. And of the long shots, this is the one that I think makes the most sense to try and get in if you want to try and find some value in a race that to me looks pretty formful. This is a horse, another one that I've already talked about, of course, so there's nothing new to say. He's a son of Justify out of a grade 1 winning daughter of sprinter Fastnet Rock. And there is actually a lot of fun stuff going on in this pedigree, which you can read more about on my blog. I will link that in the description. Next, we have Tuskin Gold. This is the lightly raced Chad Brown trainee who was third behind Catching Freedom and Honor Marie in the Louisiana Derby. And this horse really just, to a T, fits the mold of the kind of horse Chad does well with in the Preakness. His 2 Preakness winners were both Preakness winners in their 4th start coming out of the Wood Memorial. So this is a different prep a little bit earlier in the schedule. So there's a little bit more of a layoff here for Tuskin Gold. But both Cloud Computing and Early Voting won the Preakness in their 4th start after an on-the-board finish in a Derby prep. So Chad Brown knows the type of horse that he can bring to Pimlico to win. Last year, his Blazing Sevens was a really game second in this race. So again, Chad Brown knows what he has, and he thinks he fits, and he definitely seems like he fits based on numbers and what he's shown so far. This definitely does seem like the wise guy horse. He was 8-1 on the morning line, and even with Muth in the race, I didn't think we were going to get quite that much. So now I wouldn't be surprised to see him at, half that, 4-1, 5-1. But I think this is a very legitimate contender. Like I said, his figures fit based on that maiden win in Louisiana Derby. I think he can be fairly close to the pace with the stalking trip and get the jump on some of the deeper closers like Catching Freedom. Tuskin Gold costs $600,000 as a yearling. He's a son of Medaglia de Oro, out of a graded stakes winning daughter of Curlin, and that mare Valadorna was second in the 2016 Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. She is also a half-sister to Grade 1 Champagne Stakes winner Complexity, who happened to be trained by Chad Brown. So Chad Brown has some experience with the immediate family. There's tons of pedigree here, plenty of ability, and reason to believe that this horse has more to give coming in with his 4th lifetime start. And then there's Imagination. This horse is no longer the other Baffert. He is the Baffert with Muth's defection and looks like the kind of controlling speed in here from the outside. He was last seen finishing in close second to Stronghold in the Santa Anita Derby, and Stronghold made a good showing in the Kentucky Derby, didn't embarrass that form at all. He's never finished worse than second in 6 career starts, but, and this is the knock, he does seem to be in the habit of getting beaten by a neck. You see the word game a lot in his past performances, but after watching his replays, I'm inclined to think exactly the opposite. This horse could be a major D in the way he loves to wait on other horses. Multiple times in Imagination's career, he's gotten the lead, looked like he was going to just blow right by the competition, open up, and just doesn't. He just fails to do that. In his second start, he buddies up with Tapalo and fails to ever truly put him away, which then allows Better Than Gold to catch him from the outside. He was able to break his maiden gate to wire fashion, but notably never really had to go head-to-head with another horse in there. And then we come back to these last 3 starts, he's showing that same problematic behavior. In that February allowance race, he coasted up alongside Maymoon, looked absolutely loaded, while Maymoon was, kind of looked like he was done. And it looked like Imagination was just going to keep on going by, but he stalled out and ended up getting beat. And even in his win in the San Felipe, he was just waiting for Wind Me Up to come back to him. And as far as I'm concerned, he only won by coincidence. He got lucky that the wire came up when it did. He was drifting laterally throughout the stretch, and even in the gallop out was buddied up right there with Wind Me Up. And this most recent start in the Santa Anita Derby was kind of the same thing again. He overtook Tapalo on just sheer ability, and then immediately shifts his focus to Stronghold coming outside, and once again just kind of buddies up and coasts with him all the way through the gallop out. So this is a horse that clearly has a lot of ability. He should get a favorable pace set up with the scratch of his stablemate. And I just have a hard time though trusting him on top, especially as one of the betting choices. I don't think you can leave him out of verticals at all. I think this is a horse you could key in second, probably in this race, but I'm going to be taking a stand against him on the win end. If he beats me, then so be it. But this just doesn't seem to me, like he's a horse who wants to win races at this point in his development. So there's some immaturity there that I'm just not convinced he's over, and I'll let him beat me and prove me wrong. Pedigree-wise, there's a ton of pedigree here. He sold for $1.05 million as a yearling, and there's good reason for it. He's a son of the breed shaping sire Into Mischief and out of Magical Feeling, who was a graded stakes winner at 7 furlongs by Empire Maker. So that means he's bred on the exact same Into Mischief, Empire Maker cross as both Mandaloon and Laurel River, who was obviously dominant in this year's Dubai World Cup. That Into Mischief Empire Maker cross has gotten 10 stakes winners and 89 starters to date, and thus has proven to be very effective. Going back a little deeper, this is actually the female family of Baffert's Preakness Stakes winner National Treasure, who shares his 5th dam with Imagination, as well as horses like Telling, Leofric, Golden Ticket, and Dream Tree, who also trace to that mare Mana on the bottom. So while Imagination is a very physically talented horse and has every right to be with his pedigree, I'm going to take a stand against him on top because of what just seems to be some lingering immaturity. Perhaps this is the race where he puts it all together and you might decide to bet on that, but I'll let him beat me if that's the case. So taking a look at the race as a whole, the pace scenario, I think, is going to play a really big factor in the outcome here. And Imagination does appear to be lone speed on paper. We know a Baffert horse can steal the Preakness on the lead, but as I said, I'm just not convinced he's a horse who wants to win races at this point in his growth, especially against top-class competition. And I think the most likely thing we see from Imagination is that he gets a comfortable lead, looks like an absolute surefire winner coming into the stretch, and just kind of waits for the rest of the pack to catch up with him. ends up finishing a super close second or third. I do think that the Lucas duo could provide some pace pressure or at least keep Imagination honest up front. And I don't think Mystic Dan will be all that far back. I expect he'll get another nice inside trip because the 3 horses to his inside are all deeper closers. I also expect Tuskin Gold to tuck in somewhere mid-pack, probably around the same type of place that Mystic Dan is, and get first run on horses like Catching Freedom. And I really just like Chad bringing in a horse that just completely fits that profile of his last 2 Preakness winners coming into here. And although Kentucky Derby starters do usually fare well in the Preakness, I'm just a little worried about Mystic Dan coming back on 2 weeks rest based on that allowance effort as a 2-year-old with that same kind of break. Like I said, they wouldn't be here if they didn't think their horse had a shot, if he hadn't come out of the race well. And I think he will run his race. I think that he almost certainly hits the board in here, but I'm a little bit worried about the price and just him being a bit of an underlay with Muth Scratch. So overall, I didn't come up with anything particularly unique or clever in here. To me, this looks like a pretty formful race. I do like Tuskin Gold on top as the new shooter to get the job done and get Chad Brown his 3rd Preakness winner. And though he's never raced on an off track, his pedigree suggests that won't be an issue. Mystic Dan has a legitimate shot to head to Belmont at Saratoga with a Triple Crown on the line, but I just think Tuskin Gold will provide a slightly better value. And a wet track certainly doesn't hurt Mystic Dan's chances. Catching Freedom could work out a trip if the pace sets up for him. He certainly has the ability to win this race, but I'm going to just relegate him to an underneath spot with the concern that he won't get his ideal setup. And I've talked plenty about Imagination. I think he's very talented. I think he's immature, and I'm not quite sure he's figured out what his job is yet. I don't think you can leave him out of the bottom of exactas and tries, but I'm going to kind of take the gamble, roll the dice that he's going to continue to show that pattern of waiting on horses that he's shown in 4 of his 6 lifetime starts so far. Maybe the track comes up sloppy, he gets a clear lead and just keeps going, but I'm not willing to put my money on that. So those are my thoughts on the 2024 Preakness Stakes. Make sure to like the video and let me know in the comments what you think of this race. Who do you like in here? Is Mystic Dan gonna head up state to Saratoga with a Triple Crown on the line? Is Imagination gonna get it done despite Muth Scratch? Do you like Catching Freedom, or are you with me on Tuskin Gold? Or do you like one of the longer shots? Let me know. And of course, subscribe to the channel for all of the great coverage we have leading up to the second jewel of the Triple Crown. And until next time, thank you so much for watching.